You got to tell me. Okay, so we're recording now, and I was just mentioning the intent of the course, the bottom line of the course is at the end of it, you should be able to do something useful in your own major. So it's kind of somewhat unusual in that it's a course that if you do well in it will help you with your other courses, whether or not it's in the same major. So that's my goal, that's my hope. All right. Uh, Let me switch to the syllabus and let's get that out of the way because it's long and boring. Here is our class Schoology page. And I have two sections of this course. Both sections are combined on this one Schoology page. So that way I can keep everybody in sync. Now, first thing that is going to look really intimidating is that you've got a crap ton of homework assigned already, but not really. Don't let that intimidate you. It is my practice to, I mean, why keep it a secret? If I'm going to assign something for you 4 weeks from now, do I really have to keep it a secret until 4 weeks from now? So what I've done here, there is one mistake. I'll point out the mistake. What I've done is I've shown you that we're going to be doing one chapter from the book each week. So I just laid that out for you. It doesn't mean that they're all due today, right? It just means that you can plan now. You see what the assignments are going forward. And if you want, I'll explain how and you'll see why. You can dip into these future chapters. In fact, you'll have to dip into the future chapters ahead of time. Now, the projects will be like that as well. I'll put something called a specification, namely that's a fancy word for the definition of the assignment. I'll put specifications online uh, ahead of actually assigning them so that if you're inclined, you can get started on the project due 5 weeks from now. You can do it tomorrow. Just do me a favor, don't hand it in until 5 weeks from now. So that's the favor I'm asking of you, is that if you do work on a project for the future, hand it in when we get there. Don't hand it in right away. Okay? Uh, Protocol in class, don't raise your hand. Don't wait for me to be recognized. Don't go into the chat and say, I have a question, okay? Because I'm not going to see it. I just want you to talk. Just unmute and start talking, okay? I wish that was the entire syllabus, but it isn't. So I'm going to click here and click there. All right. So I've already mentioned this intent part. Um, we're going to assume that you know nothing about programming. If that's you, perfect. If you already do know how to do a lot of programming, then it's okay. Won't kick you out of the class. But you know, some of it's going to be a review for you. Perhaps a lot of it's going to be a review. That's okay. And that's another benefit of posting the assignments early, right? So if you are able to advance very quickly through the course, be my guest. Go right ahead. Okay. Now, this course does not count for the CS major or minor. So I have kind of a hidden agenda. Uh, you know, secretly when I go to sleep at night, and the first thought that I have when I wake up is, boy, I hope everybody in 1100 gets so jazzed about computer science that they want to become majors. Okay, so if that's you, you just need to know that this class doesn't count towards the major or minor. Okay. By the way, minor is a great deal. A minor in CS is a great deal. It'll help you get paid more, be more attractive to employers, and being a minor, it's not as intense as a major. You might be able to fit it in. Okay, let me wet my whistle here. Uh, okay, we're going to learn the Python programming language. Now, Python is really, it's like really laid back and it's chill. Um, it's also super employable and it is super popular. Over here, I mentioned this thing called the TIOBE index, and it is a measure of how popular or important individual programming languages are. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And Python is the world's third most popular programming language. Every year it goes up and up. It only has 2 more spots to climb. But Python is gentle and it's powerful. There are some major websites that are implemented in Python. And at the same time, it's something that I can teach you in a course that might be called CS0. Any poets here? Because this would be CS for poets. Any future presidents here? Now, it's politics. Let's not go there. All right, so Python's wonderful. It's really laid back, and it's a very gentle learning curve. Part of the power of Python is that it has so many pre-written packages or libraries that do the hard work for you. So there's Python packages for chemistry and biology and for math and for processing spreadsheets. And in fact, we'll do quite a bit of that this term. You know, Python is just wonderful in that there's so much already written for you. So that's why this cartoon is here. It's kind of a little joke. Um, the student in green has presented their thesis to their advisor, and the advisor says, this is what it's like, by the way, to program in Python. The advisor says, you can't just import thesis, as if thesis was one of these pre-written packages. So if you're a computer person, then you'll find this funny. If not, you'll roll your eyes. So let me see. Let me check the eyes. Any eye rolls? Not too many. Pretty good. Okay. Any questions so far? This is your opportunity, by the way, to do your part of the bargain. Ask questions, talk. Anybody have any questions?
No, I don't. I just wanted to talk though, just to, you know.
Nick, good job. Good on you, Nick. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a question. Oh.
Go ahead.
My question is like programming and coding like the same thing, pretty much? Okay.
Mhm. Right. So we call the results of programming, the actual tangible, the way that you express your programming is in computer code. So you might say that you're coding, you might say you're programming, um, and it would mean the same thing. Okay? Anybody else?
Got it.
Okay. Moving on. So we're going to cover a large part of the language called Python. We'll be looking at variables, which are different. Variable is a way of storing data, and lists and dictionaries and tuples, also different ways of organizing your data. We'll find out how to get input from a keyboard or input from a file, be able to write to the screen or write to a file. We'll be able to save graphs to files that you could then import into another program. We'll be looking at what's a fancy name is selection statements, but More simply, it's called an if statement. It's a way of deciding sometimes you'll do this, sometimes you'll do that. Otherwise, programs would be really, really boring if they always did the same thing all the time. We'll be looking at how to do loops, which is to repeat code over and over as many times as appropriate. We'll look at functions, which are little bundles nicely wrapped with a bow on top of bundles of code, which you can then reuse in different locations. And parameters is how you customize functions. And we'll be looking at a few of those fancy pre-written libraries I've been telling you about. The class textbook is online, and it's one of these fancy interactive electronic books. The way that you get access to it is go to this website and create an account with your Carthage email address, and then buy this book. Now, there's a few advantages to doing the electronic book. One is it's way less expensive than other computer programming books. Textbooks, I don't have to tell you, and believe me, I experienced it firsthand myself. Textbooks are insanely expensive. You know, typically the professor is the author of the textbook, and that's how they make their side money. So instead of $150 for a programming language textbook, forgive me, the electronic text is somewhere around 60. Another advantage is it is just felt something biting my ankle, and I got a whole bunch of ankle biters here in the house. I have a 4-month-old puppy, which probably not today, but she'll get on camera one of these days. So the electronic textbook is interactive. It has text like any textbook, but then it also has 2 types of ways for you to interact. One is called a participation activity. Woo, you get a prize you do in fact get a prize for participation. And then there's also challenge activities. So the participation activities are, you get credit for having watched an animation or perhaps done some multiple choice. The challenge activities are writing code, which you write directly into the textbook and they give you an answer immediately. They give you feedback right there on the spot. Now, all of that is reported to me. So as you'll see when we get to grading, 30% of your grade is how much of the book you do. Okay? So the use of the class textbook is therefore required because it's an important part of your grade. Another helpful resource is this link here. And we are recording? Yes, good, okay. This link here is helpful. And of course, an important resource is Bailey. An important resource is myself. Now, it's very important that if you do look things up on the internet, which I encourage you, of course, to do, it's very important that you recognize there are not 1, but 2 current versions of Python, and they are not compatible with each other. It's like, WTF, Batman, why are you doing it that way? But this is the way it is. There are 2 versions of Python that are current. So you need to know which version the online resource refers to, because we're learning version 3. if your online resource is version 2, you're going to get the wrong lessons, right? So when you go to look something up, make sure it's the right version, and that's version 3. Now, we'll be using something like 3.8, but the decimal number, the number after the decimal, isn't important as that first number, 3. So don't use references for Python 2, 2.7, for example. Now, in the book, we'll be covering chapters 1 through 8, and 10, and 12, and 15, for sure. We're not necessarily going to do them in sequential order. Now, your homework assignments for the reading, those are in sequential order. Week 1, do chapter 1. Week 2, do chapter 2. However, once you start getting programming assignments, the specifications will say you're going to need to use such and such. And such can be found in Zybooks chapter 5.2. And that might be in week 1. So in other words, it's referring to a part of the book that hasn't been assigned yet, but that's okay. It's telling you where to look. And besides, when it gets to week 5 and you're responsible for chapter 5, you will already have done a bunch of that assignment. So you're not doing extra work. You're going to get credit for all of that time. Anybody have questions about that?
Nope.
With the different versions of the Python thing, which one do you want us to get, like within the 3?
Yes, within 3, it doesn't really matter. Now we're going to use an online Python. Yay! Another account you have to open up and another password to keep track of. We're going to use an online Python so that everyone in the class will be using the same version. You can also install all of this on your own personal computer. If you have a Mac, Python 3 is already installed. If you have Windows, it comes with Python 2, and you'd have to go and install Python 3. I have tutorials online of how to do those installations, but as I mentioned, you won't have to. You won't have to for this course. Okay? Does that help you? Good. All right. Hey, take a look at the grading. The extra credit is built in. So notice the numbers there sum up to 110%. So it's possible for you to score above 100. And then, of course, the grades will be based on capped at 100. So that's how extra credit's built in. There'll be a midterm and a final. They will be administered through Schoology in the form of their quiz feature. So there'll be multiple choice or things like multiple choice. The final will be cumulative, and you will be taking them at home or whatever it is that you are. It is conceivable that you could flip open a reference book to come up with answers. What you shouldn't do, of course, is text your friends, what do you have for question 7? Okay, so don't do that. But if you want to open up Wikipedia and look up answers, that's fine. Now, occasionally I might use one of your projects that you turn in class. I'll remove names, and doing so is not punitive. It's there might be something in one of your projects that is like super awesome and I want to share, or there might be a problem that many people have. So I'll pick one and we can go through that code in class and figure out what the solutions are to the problems that perhaps more than one person had. So if I do happen to select your code to demonstrate to class, don't feel bad about it. It's all in constructive spirit. Okay. Now, for accommodations and accessibility, some students have sent in to me letters concerning accommodations, and uh, I think you'll find that we're really chill in this class. If you need extra time, just take extra time. There's, you know, there's going to be lots of time given, and uh, uh, the videos of each class will be online, and the videos will contain um, subtitles. So you'll be able to read if reading is better suited to your learning style. You will also, I haven't tried this before, but there's a way to be able to search the text. So I'll see if I can figure out, if only I knew something about computers. Hmm. All right, I'll see if I can try to figure that out. So you could search within a class. Okay. Now, learning outcomes. Professors love to talk about the learning outcomes. That's buzzword bingo. Now, but I got to tell you, uh, in the old days, in a car commercial, they would always tell you the mileage that the car should get. You know, this Oldsmobile will get 4 miles per gallon. And then they'll say, your mileage may vary. And what they're saying there is that not everyone is going to get 4 miles per gallon, or in some cases, 4 gallons per mile. That's cars from a long time ago. But the point is that uh, a lot of whether or not you learn the learning outcomes is up to you. So not everyone will master all of the parts of the course that it is my hope that you do master. So that's sort of like a cover my behind uh, text. Concerning the learning outcomes. Also, more cover my behind the possibility of changes to the course. I'm going to react to where I think you are. You know, I'm going to try and teach you no matter where it is that you are. Try to come to you. And um, it could be that the class in general is able to go faster than I thought. It also could be that the class needs to go slower than I thought. So I reserve the right to change the content of the course based upon how you folks are doing. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Academic success and health. Okay. I've been doing computer science for close to 50 years. Close to 50 years. And as you can see, I am in very uh, tip-top physical shape. Just, you know, I'm like totally in shape and I can do a marathon. Of course, that's BS. So here's a part of the course where you should do as I say, not as I did. The fact is, I'm obese, out of shape, get out of breath, walking upstairs. So don't be me, right? Remember to take care of yourself. Uh, Computer science is so awesomely fun. You're going to want to sit in your chair for 30 hours a day. Just don't do it. Remember to get up, go have a good time, be a college student, and of course, reserve a few minutes a day for your schoolwork, okay? I don't have office hours per se. Instead, every hour is potentially an office hour. So what I've learned is if I pick a few hours during the week, no matter what I pick, there's going to be some set of students who can't possibly make it to that office hour, set of office hours. So instead, what I do is I let you choose the office hours. And you choose it by going to Google Calendar, which all of you have. You add my calendar so you can see when I'm busy. And whenever there's a time and day that works for you, that's empty for me, create an appointment request and send me an invitation to meet. And that could include nights and weekends. Okay? I mean, it's COVID, right? It's life in the year of COVID. It's like every day is the same, and the hour of the day doesn't matter. So so feel free to make appointments with me. I'll be happy to help you. Okay? The academic honesty guidelines are found at the link that I've given in the text. The TLDR is don't do those things. Now, this is not a required course for your majors. So here, let me close my door. I don't know if you can hear the dogs barking. So this is not a required course for any of your majors. I'm not really going to bust your chops all that hard. Instead, let's face it, if you cheat, the person you're cheating is you. So I'm telling you up front, I'm not gonna look too hard to investigate cheating in this class. But really, the whole point of the class is to give you tools that will help you in your other classes. So if you cheat, then you're negating the opportunity for this class to fulfill its promise, which is to help you in other classes. Okay? All right. I'm sure you are like totally wondering what I'm all about. That's probably the most important thing on your mind. So I'll just show you. I'll quickly switch over now to here. This is me in a nutshell. Okay, so you should give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound. No sound?
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
All right, I can fix that real quick. New share. Yep, the box is not clicked. I should have done that.
If I had brought my phone here, imagine this is a phone. I'm an actor. I did some pantomime before. Okay, I'm going to take a selfie. Watch. Now I show it to you. It's the side of my face. Do you see that? It's not bad. It looks really good. See? And it's really easy. So imagine that happened, and now I read this. With just a click, and voila, a portrait in profile. See? Right there. Right there. 200 years ago, you would have, in order to do this, which you can clearly see in my hand, you would have had to sit for a portrait painter to get this shot, okay? Or if you wanted to do it the fast and on the cheap, you'd have a silhouette artist do the job. Working purely by eye, using a piece of black paper and sharp scissors, a skilled silhouette cutter could quickly fashion the paper into a solid profile portrait, which would then be pasted onto a piece of white background paper and framed. Yesterday's silhouette cutter has morphed into today's video rotoscoper. Think Mark Hamill holding a sawed-off broomstick and the rotoscoper matting and transforming him into Luke Skywalker brandishing his light sword, or me holding a not really, but anyway. It's not 18th century cut and paste, but you get the picture. Now, when shooting at 24 or more frames per second, laboring over mats for every one of them can be a time-intensive process, unless, of course, You are using an Emmy-winning rotoscoping tool aptly called Silhouette, and it looks like this.
Invented over 100 years ago, rotoscoping is a frame-by-frame animation tracing technique to reproduce lifelike movement. Since then, the term has broadened beyond hand-drawn animation to visual effects. But at its heart, the principle is the same: to trace or cut out objects or characters for isolation and compositing. Roto is now the backbone of visual effects. Enter Silhouette, a fully featured GPU-accelerated compositing system with its standout features being rotoscoping and paint, as well as a total of 142 different visual effects nodes, all enabled for stereo 3D. Our rotoscoping innovations include a system designed for speed and a small memory footprint, allowing thousands of shapes and keyframes without impact upon performance. Silhouette also features a unique hybrid paint system that provides the speed of raster with the repeatability of vector. It's purpose-built for visual effects, including the removal of wires and rigs, tracking markers, blemishes, dirt and scratches, as well as retouching. The work of roto and paint artists is not only time-consuming, but is applied across the majority of shots in a production. For close to 15 years, Silhouette has made a contributing impact to television post-production by making these laborious tasks easier. One roto shape and one paint stroke at a time.
Accepting on behalf of Silhouette are Paul Miller, Peter Moyer, Marco Paolini, and Perry Kilvalovitz.
Okay, so been a serial entrepreneur. Whoops. Hang on. Yeah, I was listening to one of my partners giving his acceptance speech, which I don't need to hear because I heard it before. Besides, don't need to listen to that guy. Okay, so serial entrepreneur for more than 30 years and 5 businesses principally in the visual effects for television motion pictures. And also this is my 16th year teaching at the college level. So that's me. If you have any questions about that, there's nothing a professor likes to do more than to talk about themselves. So if you do have a question, let me know. All right, let's go back. Well, hearing none, we'll go back to the, oh yeah. And you see, now what I should do if I really wanted to make the big bucks, instead of using Zybooks, I should have you use one of my own books. I write zombie novels. So we should just, instead of studying programming languages, we should study zombies. Okay. All right. So let me fire up the QuickTime again so that I can take a look at how we're doing on the agenda that I have for today. And give me just another moment. There we are. And now let me switch over to it. Okay, so at this point, we have gone over the syllabus. Please, do you have any questions about the syllabus?
Nope, it was all pretty clear.
Okay, good. All right, anybody? Okay. So let's talk about the textbook. So you'll go to stop sharing this, share something else. Let's go to a browser. We'll go to Zybooks. And let's do that again. As it sort of craps out if you change the name of the window that you're trying to share. Okay, so there we are. Showing the browser. I will sign in, but you'll need to create an account. I'm sorry, there's so many more accounts to create. Passwords to remember. You should get a password keeper. And you'll be using the code that I provide. The email address should be your carthage.edu email address, okay? This is the book. And each week you'll be responsible for one of these chapters, and I've listed 1 through 8 so far. So in each chapter, there are a number of sub-chapters, and within each sub-chapter, there's text, like in a text book. So this is the explanatory part of the book. And then here's an example of a participation activity, which if you have done it, the shield will be filled in with a check mark. So let me show you how difficult this one was to do. The goal says type a string. So, oh look, that would have earned you credit by just hitting backspace. Okay. So let's see, here is another example. This one says indicate which items are string literals, which you'll read about. And I'll say no. And I was wrong. So it does give you some feedback instantly. And notice that the shield is not filled in. So if you go ahead and correct that, you'll find that the shield is now filled in, and you will get credit for that. So those are illustrative participation activities. Now, there's also at the end of almost all chapters, there is a challenge activity. Now, let's see, did I get credit for that one? How about, all right, I'll just do this one again. So here is a challenge activity where you have to write some code. There'll be a specification of what it is that you're supposed to do, and they'll give you a sample, right? So here's a sample of correct output. So there'll also be a line that says your solution goes here. So you click on that line, erase it, and this one is asking me to fill in person name with some input from the user. And here's person age with some input from the user. Then I will hit run. And in this case, I have a mistake. So let's just show the mistake. Okay, so if a test fails, it will tell you. And you'd look at what it told you to find out what's wrong. It says that on line 7, this kind of error occurred. You can only concatenate a string with a string. So on line 7, we've got person age plus 5. So there's my integer. So it's got to have something to do with person age. And what you'll learn as you read this is that input returned a string. So what I needed to do was to convert the string to an integer. Let me do that and run it again. And you see that it tries different sets of input to make sure that you've covered all the cases. Okay? So do you have any questions about the book? Okay, don't be dead on me. This is not supposed to be zombies, right? The other
But
class, yeah,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. When paying for the textbook, it says that it needs a class section. What section are we, or does it matter?
It won't matter. You're section 2, so go ahead and enter the 2. Okay. You'll have access to the book throughout the semester, and then I think a little bit longer. Don't buy, if there is an offer of a more expensive version, don't buy it. The more expensive version includes laboratories, which I'm not using. All right, so switching back to here, we've covered Zybooks. And now that I've added the check mark, let me tell you that the other class had a lot of questions about the book. So you guys got to pick up your game. They asked things like, do you have to do a chapter in one sitting? Can you do part of your work and go away and come back and finish it? And the answer is yes, that you can pause, go, come back the next day and pick up where you left off. Another question that they asked, let's see if I can remember. Can you try and answer more than once? And the answer is yes. The thing that will be recorded is whether or not anywhere along the line, anywhere along the way, you got the right answer. So you could even go back. I mean, not that it makes sense to do this, but you could go back and after having the right answer, put in the wrong answer. You'll still get credit for the exercise. Okay.
I have
Now,
a question.
yeah, go ahead.
How many chapters are in the book in total?
Quite a few. There are chapters and subchapters. There's a lot. Let me switch back there and go to the top, move Zoom's window over. Okay. And you'll see that there are 16 chapters. And in the syllabus, I talked about that we'll do chapters 1 through 8, and then some from 12 and 15, and something else in here somewhere. Okay? So for instance, I can tell you that we won't be doing chapter 13, we won't be doing chapter 14, but most of the chapters of the book, you're going to get good use out of the book.
About how long does each chapter take to complete, do you think? Like an estimate?
Well, it really does vary. Sometimes a chapter can be long, and sometimes a chapter can be really, really short. Let's see, I'm just trying to at random. This one's long too. So this one's only how much work is there to do here? Well, just watch that animation and do this one. Non-volatile storage with slower access. That would be disk. So how long does it take? Some might be 5 minutes, and I would imagine. No, let me rephrase that. Some sub-chapters might be as little as 5 minutes. Some might be as long as, let's say, 10 or 15. However, with that said, when you get a challenge activity, you might find yourself stumped. And in that case, it's going to take longer. Okay. Now, here's my advice. Start working on the book immediately. Do a few subchapters a day. You don't have to do all of it. just make sure that at the end of week 1, you've done all of, beginning of next week, you've done all of chapter 1. So do it in little bite-sized chunks. If you break it down that way, I know all the professors always say the same thing, and students never listen, but if you start early and work steadily, you'll do great. If you leave it to the last minute, what happens if you get stumped? You're screwed. Okay?
Thank you.
You may have noticed by now that I speak very plainly. Born and raised in crappy parts of New York City. So that's, you can take the boy out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the boy. Okie doke. I'm going to put a link into the chat in a moment, and I want you to bookmark this link because you'll need to come back to it. Chat. Do I have to stop? Oh, there it is. Okay. So bookmark this link and go ahead and go to it as well. This is a website. You won't need an account on it, but this is where you'll find the specifications for your projects. Okay, and you'll also see other material that I may provide. For example, if you click on progress, you'll see a listing of what it is that I think we've done on a particular day. So for example, if you wanted to refresh your memory on such and such a topic, you might find it in this list. Therefore, you know what day we did it. You could go get on YouTube, you'll be able to access the video for that day. Okay. Now let me show you the projects. Clicking in the projects. There are 3 projects already there. Go ahead. Does someone have a question? Okay, so I must have misheard. There are 3 projects already here. These are your first 3 projects. Don't freak out. It's not that you should be overwhelmed. It's my habit of, why keep you in suspense? Why surprise you? If I know I'm going to assign a project, why don't I just tell you about it in advance? And in this way, if you are inclined, you could look it over, roll it around in your mouth, see how it feels, see how it tastes, right? So let's take a look at your first project, which is not assigned technically yet, but conceivably you could start on it because it's here. So the first program that you're going to write for a grade is a simple implementation of rock, paper, scissors. So what you're looking at is an example of a specification. And the specification is a hopefully complete description of the program you're supposed to write. Now, what I do in the specification, there might be some external resources like going to Wikipedia to see what the game rock, paper, scissors is. Or you'll also, I will be giving you advice on various parts of the program. For example, you're gonna have to get input. So from the user, from the keyboard. So I'm saying directly, go to Zybooks, chapter 1.3, and read about input. Now here's an interesting thing. Notice this is your first project, so to speak, you're only responsible for chapter 1. No. Don't think that way. Uh, as I mentioned, to do your projects, you may need to make use of things that come from later chapters. So, for example, to get random numbers, you'd go to Zybooks chapter 5.3. So you read about random numbers, and that will help you do this project, project number 1. Now, later on in the course, you'll actually be assigned chapter 5. But you'll find that if you do the participation activities and the challenge activities for chapter 5.3 now, even before chapter 5 is assigned, when you get there and it is assigned, you'll find there's a record that you've already done it, so you won't have to do it again. So no harm, no foul. Okay, so I give various explanatory material, examples. I don't want to give you actual code for the program itself, so there are no pears, apples, or butter in rock, paper, scissors. So I'm giving you something similar, but not exactly the same. Here are the rules for rock, paper, scissors, and I'll often give you an outline of the whole program. And I will also always give you examples of the program running, the way it's supposed to work. So in this case, I ran the program, it printed, this is part you have to do, enter one of rock, paper, or scissors, and then I entered rock. Then the computer, the program, your program, the computer chooses scissors, and rock, the result of the game is rock blunts scissors. I'll also typically give you an example of bad input. Let's take a look at the bottom. Enter one of rock, paper, or scissors, and I put in jar. Well, that's bad input. So this is what you're supposed to do if you're given bad input. There's also partner rules, whether or not you can use a partner. So far, these 3 projects are done solo, but it's likely that as the projects get bigger, I'll start allowing partners to work together. And then, of course, what to turn in, it'll be your Python file.
So for this one, like for the projects, we would have to go out and download the Python from the internet then, right?
No, you don't need to, that'll be the next thing we talk about.
Okay.
So if I look here, so we just talked about GitHub, which is where you'll fetch or get access to the specifications. Now we're going to talk about something called Replit. And that deals directly with your question. I think the question you were asking is, do we have to go download Python? Was that your question? Okay, I can
Yes.
see. Okay. All right. So let's now it's the right time to talk about Replit. Again, I'm sorry, it's another website with another set of credentials, but thankfully more and more websites are allowing you to use shared credentials like log in with Google, and that makes life so much easier. So let me do a new share, go back to the browser, and I'm going to type in repl.it, Replit. And let me log out so I can log back in again. Okay, so you'll want to sign up, and thereafter you'd use login. So let me give you a few minutes to sign up so that you can follow along with the remainder of this class period. It's free, by the way. It's just another password to keep on hand.
What should we pick for skill level? Just say
Uh, 0.
so just brand new. Okay.
Brand new. Yeah.
What are the other two languages that you want us to pick or recommend us picking?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Just pick one language, and that would be Python, not Python 2.7, if you see that. Yeah, so you can select just Python.
Wait, so I got a question. You don't have you can just use your email instead, right? Your Google email to sign up to Replit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it means that there's one fewer password for you to remember, great.
Right, so once we're logged on, where do we go to?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a more than one person who has gotten all the way through the sign up process. So why don't I log in? And I just sign in with Google. This is real fast. Okay. And okay. Now, when you first enter Replit, on the left-hand side, the 3 lines will show or hide the menus on the left. And you can either click to create a REPL, which you can either click on New REPL or the plus sign, the big blue plus sign here. And for all of your classwork, you only need, let me rephrase that. For all of your in-class work, you only need one REPL. I would recommend for each of your projects that you create a new REPL just for that project, okay? There's no limit to the number of REPLs you can have. So let's do that. New REPL. And create new REPL rather than import from GitHub. So create new REPL. The language would be Python. Now down in this list of languages, there's also Python 2.7. Don't click that. So Python. And then it comes up with some wacky random name for the REPL. It's an attentive stimulating property. How about that? So I'm just going to call this one in class, which actually may fail because I have one already named that. You can keep them public, private. All right. Oh, you'd have to pay money to make them private. So create REPL. Okay, now let's talk about what we see now. Okay, you can get back to the original menu on the left-hand side by clicking those three lines again. Okay. Then there are a column of icons. The one that looks like a page is a listing of the files. And if you click on it, it'll either show or hide that listing of files. As you see, show, hide, show, etc. You can create new files. However, an empty one is already made for you. And the contents of the file that is highlighted here is shown in this middle window. Okay, but let's move over to the right hand, the dark window here. It has two tabs. One says console, the other says shell. Now we will use shell later in the class, but let's stay on console. Python is interesting in that it could either be used interactively, and that's what we see here in console, or it could be used non-interactively, like executing any other program. So that would be shell. So for now, all we need to know is console. And if you click in here and hit return a few times, the red caret is your prompt. That's Python's prompt. So you can start typing in Python right here and get instant feedback. So it's interactive. So for example, if you want to know what is the value of 5, hit 5 and hit return. The value of 5 is 5. Okay. What is the value of 5 plus 6? Well, it's 11. Okay. What is the value of zoinks? Well, that's an error. What I really wanted to do is to create a string that had the letters zoinks embedded in the string. So to do that, you would use the string surrounded by either single quotes or double quotes. So what is the value of this string surrounded by single quotes? Is that string. It would be the same as zoinks with double quotes. Whatever you start with is what you have to finish with. In fact, look at that. I typed in double quotes, Python fed back single quotes. However, let's try this one. If I start with a single and I end with a double, not balanced. Okay, they have to balance each other. Now, a question you might have is, why would you use one or the other? Anybody thinking that? Just wondering. Okay. Let me, whoops, turn off that. And okay, I'm gonna stop fiddling with it. So why would you use one instead of the other? Well, suppose you wanted to make a string out of the word don't. So typing in don't by itself is a problem. So clearly I need to surround it with quotes. So here's single quote, D-O-N, apostrophe, which in fact is a single quote. And so now I've surrounded it, but this is going to be an error also. So if I want to include in my string a single quote, then, well, I'll just surround it with double quotes. And that way I balance with double quotes, and there's a single quote inside. Okay, let me move this up just a bit, make sure it's off. I guess that didn't help. All right, so now you've already learned a couple of things. You've learned that there are strings, and you've learned that there are integers. Now, what's an integer? That's an integer. That's different from a floating point number. The term floating point refers to it having a fractional part, a decimal place, which can float depending upon how many digits come after the decimal point. So there's a little tool called type. What is the type of 5? It's an int. What is the type of 5.5? That's a float. And what is the type of a string? str, standing for string. There's one more basic type that I would like to talk about in this first class, and that would be the bool, B-O-O-L. Stands for George Boole, which would be B-O-O-L-E, who was a mathematician who first worked on the idea of having an algebra made up of nothing but trues and falses. So here is a true. It has a capital T. And here is a false. Has a capital F. And the type of true is bool, B-O-O-L. We've also learned a bit about, we saw evidence that there exist operators in operations like plus. So 5 plus 3. Of course, there's also 5 minus 3, 5 times 3. And by the way, you can put spaces in there. So 5 divided by 3. Okay, that's an example of a float. Okay, there are many other operators that you can use, but we'll learn them over time. Now, how about introducing this idea? This is all well and dandy, but I haven't actually written any code. One of the basic building blocks of writing code is this notion of a variable. Okay, and a variable is like a cup. So here I have this cup, and I'm going to give the cup a name. And then, of course, the cup can hold something. Let me demonstrate. Let's call the cup X equals 10. Notice Python didn't print anything. So now I've created a cup in the computer's memory called X. And inside that cup is the value of 10. How do I know? If I ask it what's in X, it says 10. And now I can use that. X plus 23 is 33. Did someone have a question? I kind of thought I heard a noise.
Just curious, is it possible for Python to like solve for X on its own?
That's a complicated question. Uh, kind of yes, kind of no. So the right answer is it depends. And by the way, um, the answer depends, quote, depends, is a reasonable answer for every single question in computer science. No matter what the question is in computer science, a reasonable answer is it depends. The rub, of course, is if somebody would then follow up with what does it depend on? Okay, then you'd have to have a deeper answer. But so my answer to you is it depends. So for instance, if you create a let's see, you could express an equation directly in Python, and so to speak, that would be a solving of the equation. So yes, but you also said on its own. That answer wasn't quite on its own because I had to enter the Python code for the equation. But the answer is also yes. You could give it an arbitrarily complex equation, and Python could literally solve on its own if you wrote a program that understood how to do equation solving. Let me give you a for instance. In linear algebra, there are systems of equations, let's say 5 equations with 5 unknowns. You could type in the steps yourself and ultimately reach a solution. However, more likely, you would have a program that knows how to solve linear equations. That's what it was written to do. In that sense, yes, Python can do it on its own. Does that help?
Yes.
Other questions, please? Remember, you don't want a cranky professor. All right. So here we have x, and x has the value of 10. I said x plus 23, and it said 33, but if I say what's in x, notice it's still 10. So clearly, it would be nice to be able to modify the contents of a cup, and you can do it with an assignment statement. You can, now an assignment is a single equal sign. You saw it once. That's how the 10 got in there. So the single equal sign assigns the right-hand side. It calculates the value of the right-hand side of the equal sign and puts it in the cup specified on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So what's in x now? 29. Now watch this. X is an integer, right? Well, we can also say then x equals, hi. What's in x? Well, now it's a string. I point this out because many programming languages other than Python have what's called static typing, which means once it's an integer, it's always an integer and you can't change its type like I just did. Python is like, yeah, sure, you want it to be an integer, fine. You want it to be a string, fine, I don't care, right? So Python, as I said in the beginning, Python's really relaxed, it's really chill. So you can change the type of a variable just by assigning it a new value. Now, how about this? Let's put a number back into x. What if I said x equals x plus 1? Now, math people will say, oh my God, how can you have x on both sides of the equal sign? Well, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it's not an equation, it's a Python statement. Remember what I said a moment ago, that an assignment statement, an assignment takes the value from the right hand of the equal sign and puts it in the left hand of the equal sign. So x equals x plus 1. Let's find out what's in x. Well, it's 91. So on the right-hand side is the old value of x, and on the left-hand side of the equal sign is now the new value of x. Okay? So the operators, that was the add operator, plus. There's a lot of other operators, the obvious ones, plus, minus, divide, multiply. There's, let's try the, there's also, yeah, we'll save it for another day, some of the other operators. But let's try something like x2 equal signs. Is Fred, does x equal Fred? Now, 2 equal signs isn't an assignment, that's 1 equal sign. 2 equal signs is a question. Does the left-hand side equal the right-hand side? It's a test, it's a question. So 91 does not equal Fred. So the answer is false. So how about this? X equals 91? The answer should be true. Here's another question you might have. If X is 91, what about this? If it's, well, I'll spell it out. So if a variable is equal to 80 and a variable is equal to 90, a question you might want to ask is, does case matter with variable names? And the answer is yes, case does matter. It is case sensitive. And we can ask the question, variable, and that's just the name. The name of my variable is variable. Does variable equal variable? And the answer we get back is false. So the case matters. Let me switch to my whiteboard and talk about the rules for variable names. There are some rules. So variable rules for naming. Okay, you can use A through Z. You can also use, obviously, A through Z. You can also use 0 through 9, but can't be first letter. Okay, so just look at what I wrote here. This is not a legal variable name because it begins with a number. You can also use one more character, and that is the underscore. Okay? Now, I encourage you, and this is a really important point, and then I'll stop for questions. In fact, maybe I'll stop now for questions because we only have a few minutes. No, wait, we don't end at 3:50. We end at 4. Okay, so we have time. Let's go back to Replit. Here, Replit. There it is. Okay. So variable works, but variable is an error. So you can't have spaces. Let's say $, a bull. That doesn't work. So you can't have anything except A through Z, lowercase, uppercase, and the numbers and the underscore. Let's see. So one variable is an error because the number came first. On the other hand, variable 2309, that's fine. The underscore also is very handy for allowing you to create expressive variable names. Because if I said, here's a variable named X, we got X, right? So what does X do in your program? Hell if I know. X doesn't really tell me anything. I could, if I'm wise, use expressive variable names such as number of wheels equals 4. Well, what is the number of what does that variable do? Well, obviously, it's the number of wheels. I could have called it W, right? But W doesn't really tell me anything. I could, on the other hand, give it an expressive, more sophisticated variable name, which will help me remember what my code is doing, how it works, and it will help me most importantly, understand my code and debug my code if there are problems. Okay? So understanding your code is largely up to you. Remember, when you write a code today and you come back to it next week, you don't want to look at it and say, I don't know what this means anymore. I don't remember. Instead, you want to be able to build in as much knowledge as you can into your code. One way of doing that is by making expressive variable names. That the variable's name tells you about what it does. Okay? By the way, there's one more style of making expressive variable names. So this has the embedded underscores. Another style might look like this: number of wheels. That's called camelback, like a camel, because it goes up and down. Which style you prefer is a matter of preference. So pick one and stick with it. Anybody have any questions?
Just curious, does Python only know like English letters?
That's a really good question. And I will bet you that Python can be used. I never have, but I'll bet that the correct answer is other character sets can be used. In general, code is almost always written in the Arabic numerals and the Latin alphabet. Now, nothing in, it could be that you could certainly use any other language, but the character set is the Latin character set. So you could say, I don't know, I'm going to make a fool of myself here, but uh, okay, so there's my Spanish. So notice I'm still using the Latin alphabet. Okay, does that answer your question?
Like would it be able to understand like Cyrillic or Greek, or is it just strictly Latin?
I believe it's possible
Okay.
to use alternate character sets. I think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Actually, I am sure you can, because I have seen students typing in all of their variables are in Chinese glyphs. So that's for sure, you can do it. However, it is a reasonable statement to make that the Latin alphabet is the lingua franca in computing. Okay, other questions?
Would it be a good idea to like have a notebook or something to write down like what variables would equal what in like your own stuff so you can keep track of everything?
That's an excellent idea. And I'll show you over here how one can create notes for oneself, so to help you remember what things do and mean. That would be a line, whoops, that starts with pound is a comment, I think. I do too many languages. So let me just Python 3 py. Yeah, okay, so yes. So that is a single line comment. It begins with a pound sign. So you might do something like so you're writing a note to yourself that that the value of number of wheels will be updated from a database automatically. Now, in order to get a multi-line comment, it would be three quotes in a row, three single quotes in a row. And now all of this could be free form notes. Okay, so that would be a multiple line comment. Now, let's talk about commenting. Later on, you'll find that I'm going to recommend that you write comments before you write code. That sounds weird, that you write the comments about your code before you write the code. And follow me here. Coding is like juggling. The more sophisticated the code you write, it's like juggling one ball. Okay, well, you write some more code, and now you're juggling two balls, and then three balls, five balls, 91 balls at once for some really complicated program that you're writing. And then you lose your train of thought, and all the balls fall down. Now, it's going to take you a long time to get all those balls back in the air. And that's where expressive variable names and commenting helps you the most. Okay, so when you've got 91 balls in the air, you are in the zone. It's like a meditation. And then somebody says, can you take out the cat? No, cats don't get taken out. Can you take out the dog? And all of the, who drank my milk? All your balls come crashing down. and you're gone. The zone is gone. Your meditation is gone. But it's your comments and your variable names that will help you get back in the zone quicker. So commenting and expressive variable names, very important. Great question. Thank you. Okay, any others? Okay, so I'm going to pause here, stop here. Stop here. You do have a reading assignment that is officially assigned, so have at it. I will be looking forward to seeing you again on Thursday. And if you have questions, send an email. Okay? Thank you for coming. But I have to give you some criticism. I want more talking, more interaction.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye.
Also, I got another question. For the Xi books, there's an option to do like a year extension for like $18 more. Do you think that's worth it? Because I might be able to use that. So
If you think that it'll be of use to you post-semester, after the semester, then by all means, it's a good value.
okay, well, thank you. See ya.
Chad, do you have a question? Okay, guess not.